platform is Grails object relational mapping framework. It's Groovy objects that sit on top of Hibernate. So you define your overlap, and that can generate a database from that. Think of Hibernate. It's some Hibernate with like some awesome dynamic methods that help you with associations and dynamic finders, and getting the persisted values of things, and everything you do with Hibernate. But there's some niceties and some beautiful syntax showing up there. So we're back in this Grails page filter. We've done the request. It's rendered the view. We're back into the layout filter. So it's obtaining the content of the actual model of view. It's meshed the two together, and now it's going to return that content. What there's it to do? What's that? There's it to do in there. Check if another servlet or filter put a page object in the request. Apparently that was probably some code somebody put in there to fix something and broke something else. Because it gets really complicated because you can sometimes do internal, you can get the content of a whole other page internally from the web application, right? So there are a lot of complexities there. So it uses this content buffering response, right? So instead of doing like string copying and manipulating all this, it's a streaming content buffer. So it's optimized. This is where we have a GSP site mesh page. So GSP is just short for Groovy server page, right? Or Groovy server page. So think JSP, but instead of Java, it would be with Groovy, right? So you have the tag libraries. You can actually use JSP in Groovy server pages. There's a bunch of cool tags and stuff that Grails gives you, and you can actually interact with the site mesh page here. So there's an actual page object there that you can set properties on, that you can do all sorts of cool stuff with. So,
questioning, is it assuming that the site mesh is the default template for Grails app?
It's installed by default. You can turn it off. You can modify your web XML and remove this filter from the filter chain and not have it there. Alternatively, there are some properties that you can set. You can say for this content type, don't map any site mesh pages.
The Grails page filter is the main filter for all the Grails pages, right? For all the Grails views, right?
But you don't have to. You can actually remove that filter, so it won't process the site mesh, right? So this is just a little flow chart of how site mesh works. This is just this is focused on only one portion. Sexual request, URL mapping, executing controller action. So this is this site mesh filter, right? And this is configured in web XML. So if site mesh is mapped to this request, you can configure and say site mesh is not mapped to this request. You say don't process this with site mesh. So if you are worried about performance or you want to configure it in whatever way, there are mechanisms to do that. If it is mapped to this request, it'll say it's filtered already applied. If not, then it sets that on the response. It parses the resource into a page object, and that's configurable with this site mesh XML, and you can configure content types and some more flexibility in there. It renders the page object, which is like, think that's your view, right? And then it requests the appropriate decorator. So this is like what you're meshing the view with. And if it finds a decorator, then it applies it. Otherwise, it just skips on. It usually applied, didn't have decorator, meshes the two together. So I think it'd probably be helpful to see an actual GSP. So this is the view. It's a simple. I should close all this stuff. So it's an HTML page. You have a content type. This meta tag is how you specify which layout or which decorator it gets meshed with, right? There are other ways, but So here's a title that it matches the decorator with. You can include some scripts, some JavaScript, or you can use these special G tags. And then it's just an HTML page with body. And then here's a little content container. So you were just asking about how to take one piece and plug it in different areas. You would use these content tags. And then it's just HTML from here. Here we have this dollar squiggly. This would be GSP syntax. So you're escaping out into Groove right here. And that presentation is going to be what you returned on that model. Right? So that is actually operating on this presentation. You have an open Hibernate session in this view, and this is rendering, so you can do some cool stuff with it.
I was curious about that. Is that kind of a standard approach, is to actually deal with the domain objects directly in the view like this? Is it kind of just up to preference, or is there any?
It is kind of sets a preference. If you have an open session in view, you can configure that if you don't want to, if you don't want to have that. But what it means is if you have lazy loaded properties, then they will be loaded here. Otherwise, it can throw exceptions if it weren't there, if you didn't access it. So the whole idea is you don't have to flush out your entire model and every attribute that a page is going to use in your controller. You can do that here in the view. So for example, if I got the presentation and it lazy loaded the title and didn't have the title, it would go to the database right here and get the title. Right there in the view.
So, this is it. For Spring MVC, though, you actually set those attributes on the view, and then what are all the attributes or objects that you set on the view? That's what you can access in the actual.
Yeah. So there's
right for Grails.
It's that model that you return, right? That gets created as a model in view, and it's the model.
I meant the model. You set all the objects on the model, and then you access it, right?
Yes.
Is it the same or is it different?
It is the same.
Okay.
And this presentation object, it uses some meta class Mojo to dynamically figure out that is bound on the model.
Well, that's the thing. MVC does that, right? When you have if you have a view which is tied in the Spring MVC, then it actually figures out that the objects that you use in the view is tied to Spring model object, right?
Right. So it's very, very simple.
Okay.
So from security, if let's say there was some data in the presentation that title, script tags, or something like that, is it automatically HTML coding that, or?
Yeah, you can configure the default codec and the codec that you're rendering this page with. Beyond that, there's plugins like an anti-SAMI plugin that you can filter out what actually goes in your database. Otherwise, if you want to go another step further, you could load this in your. You could set a getter on this get title that would filter that stuff out. You can set a get safe title or something else that would basically. Lots of different options you have. And then here's this little flash message. Like if you've ever created something on a page or like Twitter and it says post, submitted successfully or tweet succeeded. That's what this flash message would be. It's just a way to communicate back across requests. And that's all the view is this lightweight the header content tag, and then this main thing gets stuck into the layout body. Let's show you the layout real quick. So this is the layout. Super simple. You can imagine if your company would probably be bigger and have all sorts of interesting things in it. This is just a simple app. It's just an HTML document with a title, and this is the layout title tag. This is where it's going to mesh the title that you define in your view with what gets rendered to the actual page. The layout head, so anything, any resources that you had in the head of your previous views head right there would get meshed together and inserted right here. And then the body of your view would get meshed together right here. And then that header content tag, I don't know, see.
So is there a default behavior if you don't provide a full HTML document? Like if you just do a fragment, we'll just stuff it in the body or something? Or, I don't know if you've ever tried that. Another one.
There really isn't. If you forget that G-code layout body, it's not going to render.
I mean, the original view, though, if I just supplied a fragment instead of a full HTML document.
I guess it'll just include based on the tags, right?
Yeah, well, you're going to return, it's going to be a view, even if that view is empty string.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I'm trying to apply the default layout.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like an application default layout. Is that what you're asking? Like how does it know what layout gets mapped to what, or what view gets mapped to what layout?
Well, I think if there's no head tag, body tag, or views will be.
Yeah, it will.
Will automatically assume that that's actually just all body because.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what it'll do. And that's a pattern that I've seen people do. It's really nice though that you can. This is a real HTML page in your view. You can edit it, and you can view it just by itself. So you
can remove site mesh completely, still.
And it'll still render. Exactly. So that's the layout portion of it. There's all these nice tags for defining libraries and resources. All sorts of nice things. So we're almost back to how to Shire. We're on this obtain content, right? So this is that site mesh stuff that we just talked about mapping all that stuff. It's trying to obtain the actual string, the response that it's actually going to return. It's going to get this content, it's going to figure out what content type that page is, and then it's going to select the decorator, the layout, right? And then it's going to, it's connecting the persistence layer again. So this is that open session view stuff. And then it's going to render the mesh them together, right? Use the decorator and do it. And that's just about it. There's a bunch of code in there and how it does it, but you get the idea. So then we are back in the Shire. Thank you.